everybody, this is Tracy here with another edition of A View from Tracy's Point. And today we're going to do some updates on the R. Kelly case. And my main focus, however, is going to be about the twins. Lindsay and Jen, who are working on the four-part Surviving R. Kelly Aftermath series that's supposed to come out, I believe they're saying, in January. But they actually did a interview. Well, they've done 3 or 4 interviews in the past week over with Phases, The Next Level, and you can go over there and check out the full interviews. But they made some comments during that interview that was a bit problematic. And to be honest with you, I watched the first video that had both of them in the video, and I was really turned off by some things that they said. And so I was going to do a video about that. And then they came out with the other videos, and people were inboxing me, saying, go check out these videos. But I was pretty much over them at that point, so I wasn't going to watch the video. And then you guys know that I follow both sides of the story. If Angelo goes live, I watch his lives. I watch Tim's lives. I try to be fair and balanced and give, my thoughts and my opinions on both sides of the things if somebody says something that interests me. And so I was watching, Angelo did a video the other night, and he basically pointed out some of the things that I had clicked in my brain about the interview that they did. And so I decided to go back and watch the other videos that they did. And so what it came across to me as was they did that first video together, and then they saw the feedback that they were getting, or they watched the video and was like, oh God, we got to go back and clean this up or clean that up. But then they did separate videos. So Jen did a video because she says Lindsay is always over talking her. And then Lindsay came back and did a video by herself. And so they were pretty much digging into the things that they had said in the first video together. And so the things that kind of like I found problematic where they made several references, to white privilege. And then the other thing was when they, the other thing was at the end of both videos, they were sort of like, I don't know, they were kind of being overly aggressive, I felt, towards the people that were listening to the video, like basically saying, you have to believe us. We're the only ones that's fighting for him. Nobody else is fighting for him, and so I'll get into more of that when I actually talk about the interviews and my impressions and some thoughts that I wrote down about the interviews. But before we get into that, I want to go ahead and give you guys some of the latest updates. So I think the biggest news since my last video was that there is a woman in Hennepin County, Minnesota, who claims that she was abused by R. Kelly back in 2001, I believe. And so she says that she was a minor, that she wanted to go to R. Kelly's concert, that she said she couldn't get into the concert because she was underage. I think she was like 16 or something. And so they were asking for ID. Now, I have never bought a concert ticket before and was asked for ID to prove how old I was. I have gone to several R. Kelly concerts, and I have never seen them card people at the door. I mean, you buy tickets online. Well, nowadays you buy tickets online. I'm sure probably in 2001 you could buy tickets online as well. But anyway, she said that she couldn't get them tickets, okay? So somehow, well, actually, let me pull the story up and read it to you guys. Okay, so this article is from the USA Today. It says R. Kelly is now facing 4 sets of separate sex charges, with the newest filed Monday by authorities in Minneapolis, Minnesota. And it says Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman announced at a news conference in Minneapolis that Kelly is being charged with 2 counts of prostitution and solicitation involving a girl under 18 for an alleged incident in 2001. Freeman said Kelly is charged in an incident involving a girl he met at a concert. The girl sought an autograph from Kelly and he gave her the autograph and a phone number. When the girl called the number, she was invited to Kelly's hotel and offered $200 to take off her clothes and dance. The prosecutor alleged. He says Kelly took his clothes off and they danced together. It is despicable that Mr. Kelly used his fame in order to prey on underage girls, Freeman said. While there are more numerous charges in the Illinois and federal cases, we wanted to make sure that our victim here in Minneapolis also receives a measure of justice. We fully expect that at some future date, Mr. Kelly will have to account for his actions in Hennepin County. Freeman says his office investigated after getting a tip from the Chicago tip line. Now, y'all remember Kim Fox was the one that set up this tip line trying to get people to call in and make accusations or tell their story or whatever it was that she was trying to do. And so he goes on to say, we felt we had more than enough to charge based on her testimony and corroboration from her brother. Okay, so how hard would it be for this woman and her brother to sit down and concoct this story and be in agreement with each other before going to the police? Because we know what happened with the Surviving R. Kelly, that they docuseries, because they had like 17 months to put their stories together. And so he says, I don't like buying sex from minors, and I don't like most other people who do either. And this is the prosecutor that's talking. So according to the criminal complaint, the woman contacted police in January when the anti-film series Surviving R. Kelly aired on Lifetime to report an incident that occurred the day of Kelly's concert on July 11, 2001, when she was 17 years old at the time. And so one of the things that the twins said in their interview was that they went back and checked their books because according to them, they still have all their records from when they worked with R. Kelly. They have all the booking documents. They have all these records. They had Joanne's birth certificate. They had all these pictures. So all this stuff they've been holding on to for the past 20 years. Is it 20 years or is it 98? Yeah, for the past 20 years, or however long it's been since they worked for him. And so they said that he did not have a concert on July 11th and that he did not stay at the hotel that the woman claimed that they had gone to. But then I was reading on social media where somebody said that they live in Minnesota and that they actually attended that concert and that the concert was indeed on this date. So I don't know if this is somebody who's against R. Kelly and was just trying to put that out there, or if the information was factual. I will go back and fact check, because you guys remember I was able to pull up some other information about some other concerts, like the women in Baltimore who couldn't remember when they went to see R. Kelly and when their abuse allegedly happened. And then Gloria Allred had the picture of them with LL Cool J. And so I was able to find the date for that actual concert, even though they couldn't remember the concert. So I'll look for that as this is loading and drop it into the video for you guys. And then the article goes on to say, Freeman said the 3-year statute of limitations for such cases in Minnesota only applied if Kelly remained in the state, which he did not. And Kelly's lead defense attorney, Steve Greenberg, tweeted, "Give me a break. This is beyond absurd." And so Gloria Allred, our favorite person, the crusading attorney who represents multiple Kelly accusers, says she represents this newest accuser of Kelly, whom she did not identify, but she sought to clarify that her client is not a prostitute despite the language of the charges against Kelly. And she says, "I would like to emphasize that my client is not a prostitute. She is instead a child victim of Mr. Kelly." Allred said in a statement emailed to USA Today, "My understanding from law enforcement in that state is that the only available statute for which Mr. Kelly can be charged is the prosecution statute." Now this just let you know that these people are just they are reaching, they're making up stuff, they're trying to be a part of the story by any means necessary. Then it goes on and says that she urged Minnesota to change its laws to more properly reflect crimes against children. In its present form, some victims may be fearful of coming forward because they don't want to be classified as prostitutes when nothing can be further from the truth. Well, my thing is, if you was out there dancing for money, I mean, if you was getting naked with people obviously ready to have sex, then what do you call it, okay? There's at least one other accusation in a different state, Michigan, also has been under investigation. In March, the Detroit Police Department acknowledged it was investigating allegations that Kelly sexually assaulted a 13-year-old girl in 2001 in Detroit. Police Chief James Craig issued a statement then saying Detroit police got a tip about the alleged crime from Chicago police. Now, whatever happened with that case, because actually that was why Nicole Becker came on board, was because if charges were filed against him, you know, she is licensed to practice law in Michigan, and so she was going to handle that case. But it seems like that case just died down. But this just goes to show this was another call that came in from Kim Foxx's hotline that she set up. And then, you know, the FBI has also set up a hotline. So it'll be interesting to see if anybody has called in to give some new tips, because as it stands, we still got the same people from the docuseries telling the same stories that have created all these charges. It goes on. Allred says she also represents that accuser, now an adult. She told USA Today that her client had been interviewed by police and was willing to testify about her allegations, but no charges have been filed in Michigan. Okay, so there was another article that was more detailed about what happened. Like I was starting to say, she said that she couldn't get into the concert because she was underage and she didn't have ID, which I didn't understand. But then she also alleges that after she met R. Kelly and went to his room and performed, and he gave her this $200, he told her, oh, but don't try to buy a ticket with the $200. I'm going to put you on a list or something to get you in for free. And so that's how she was able to get into the concert. And when her brother saw her, who I guess was over 18, you know, he asked her, how did you get in? And so she told him the story at that point. But then I guess at no point did they decide to go back and tell their parents what happened. And then once again, we have to look at the parents, because if your child is going to is a minor going to an adult concert, where were you when the child said she wanted to go to this concert? Like, how did she get to the concert venue? Where did you think she was at? And so also connected to this story, the twins are now saying that they have proof that the person who's accusing R. Kelly in this Minnesota case is actually Lisa Van Allen's friend Beverly. And so remember, Beverly kept coming up, and so people were saying, you know, they were saying that they were glued at the hip, and you know, Beverly would know everything that happened between R. Kelly and Lisa Van Allen, and people need to talk to Beverly. So now they're claiming that Beverly is this accuser. And so I don't know who the accuser is, because they haven't named the accuser, but the problem I have with them saying that it was Beverly is that in these latest interviews that they did, they said that Beverly graduated from a high school in Evanston, Illinois. Well, Evanston, Illinois is a bit of a distance from Minnesota, okay? I think when I Googled it, it said, when I just Googled Evanston, Illinois to Minnesota, it came up that it was like an 8-hour drive. And when I put in the Hennepin County, it came up as like almost 7-hour drive. So did Beverly drive? Because we know she was a minor, and if she went to high school in Evanston, Illinois, are we saying that she drove to this concert? Are we saying she flew to the concert? Once again, how did she get into Minneapolis to attend this concert and do all this stuff with R. Kelly that you guys are claiming? And then they say that they made the connection because of some pictures that somebody sent to them that had Lisa Van Allen and the Beverly girl in the picture in Florida, and then they compared that picture to another picture, and they know it's the same person. And I'm just like, are y'all serious right now? So it remains to be seen if Beverly is really the person in this lawsuit. And then, does Beverly live in Minnesota now? They say that the reason they were able to charge R. Kelly was because he left the area and he didn't fit the statute of limitations requirements. So it sounds to me like the person who's accusing him is actually a resident of Minnesota and was a resident of Minnesota when the alleged crime happened. So I don't know. That one isn't adding up for me either. And so what else came out? Oh, the story came out about, there was some concern that R. Kelly was not transported back to Chicago after his hearing in New York. But then sometime late last week, I believe it was, Steve Greenberg did come out and say that he had finally been transported back to Chicago, and he is back in the MCC unit. And then he also talked about the letters and cards that R. Kelly is receiving. He says that he is getting the mail, so you guys continue to mail if that was something that you wanted to do. And then in an interview, he also spoke on the fact that R. Kelly has his Bible. And I really wish Steve Greenberg would stop talking about the fact that the man can't read or write, because it kind of, I don't know. I just don't like the tone and the feel of it when he's talking about it. So in one sentence, he's saying, oh, well, he can't read and write, but the Bible gives him comfort. But then on the other hand, he turns around and says, oh, yeah, he's gotten the mail. 97% of it has been positive. And although he can't read and write, he can, sound out some words, and he can write down, phonetically write down certain words. And so, I don't know, kind of just leave it alone, Steve. And, then the big news happened with Epstein. You guys are always telling me, why don't you talk about Epstein? Why don't you talk about Epstein? I don't talk about Epstein because it's hard enough doing these R. Kelly videos and having to fight with YouTube about the monetization for the videos. I can only imagine with Epstein, because Epstein has been proven to be what he was accused of being. So that's why I didn't talk about Epstein. But the news regarding him was that he allegedly committed suicide over the weekend. And there's this whole conspiracy theory going out that he didn't really commit suicide, that he was murdered because there was an issue with the cameras, so they don't have any footage of when he actually killed himself. We don't know how he killed himself. There was an autopsy going out, but I haven't seen any articles with updates about the autopsy. And then other conspiracy theories are saying that it was a fake person that we see being wheeled out of the jail after he died. That's, the body is being taken, I think, to the medical examiner's van, but it wasn't covered up. So somebody took a picture and released it to social media, and there were some discrepancies about the shape of the nose, the design. I guess we all have unique designs in our inner ear, and so the cartilage makeup in his ear was different from the actual Jeffrey Epstein person. I think that the body does change after a person dies, and we don't know how long he had been dead before they found the body. So I guess, if he was laying on this bike, I guess the facial features could have flattened out. I don't know. But I do believe he was murdered. I don't believe he committed suicide. But, the stories about, they put this fake person in so that they could distract and actually get him out of the country, because he had too much information against powerful people for them to allow him to testify. So that part lends to the notion that they would have killed him, not that they would have shipped him out of the country, but to some private island. But those are the theories that's going around, and I only bring Epstein up because a lot of people became concerned that something similar could happen to R. Kelly. I don't believe that is the case, because R. Kelly is just a black man that the justice system is trying to drag down, because that's what they do. I think that Epstein had wealthy people problems. R. Kelly has rich people problems, and so there's a difference. Okay, rich people problems don't last long, because you can deprive the rich people of their money, and they can only fight as far as their money goes. Wealthy people have unlimited access to money, and they have unlimited access to do the little dirty nasty things that they do, and to cover it up. And so there's a reason that people would have wanted to kill Epstein, and I don't see those same reasons existing with R. Kelly. And I know people like to throw out the whole Sony could then take over his masters if they kill him. First, you would have to convince me that Sony is fighting for his masters, because I keep telling y'all, why are you fighting for what you already own? Oh, and then people were asking about the Chicago hearing on the Chicago charges, and my understanding is that the Chicago case has been put on hold, so there's not going to be a hearing later this week. I think he had a hearing that was set for Thursday, I believe. So my understanding is that that hearing is not going to take place. So, everybody was wondering with the federal charges, they kept talking about, the Jane Does. They didn't want to name, who the accusers are. And you guys, I thought it was so funny that this judge from the UK, over in England, made a comment the past week or so, where he was saying that accusers need to stop, people need to stop calling accusers victims, because when you use the term victim, you are alleging that it has been proven to be true, and that until a person has actually been convicted of a crime, that these people are accusers. They're not victims. So stop using the term victim when talking about them. And so I thought that was interesting. So with the feds trying to, seal the identities of the women, people are reading the indictments, and they're putting two and two together, and they're coming up with who they believe these people are. So these three clips that I'm going to show you, I got them off of the Twitter page for a support channel called Kale's Nation. And so I don't know if she created them or if she got them from somebody else, but I got them off of Kale's Nation's Twitter page. And so she's basically naming who all of the Jane Does are, who are all these people, and just showing you that we're still dealing with the same people. And so the only one that called into question is the New York indictment, where they're saying that one of the Jane Does is Lanita Carter. And then I read somewhere else where the person was saying that the Jane Doe is Patrice Jones and not Lanita Carter. So I'm not sure, where they're getting the information from, if they have verified that these are the people, or if they're just going by the information that was provided in the indictments to determine who these people are. So I did ask Kale's Nation who Patrice Jones was, and she told me that she was an accuser from 1999 who also did a settlement with the Susan Logan's woman. And so I think if anything that R. Kelly's attorney should be pushing is trying to get an indictment against Susan Logan and also trying to dig deeper to find out what her relationship to the Daryl McDavid person, because he was the one that was negotiating these settlements, and allegedly he was the one that was writing the checks, and that R. Kelly knew nothing about them. Then we move over, and there was a story that came out that says prosecutors are seeking to seal R. Kelly's medical records to expedite the case. And so I was kind of confused by this whole what they're trying to do. So I'll just go ahead and read this article to you guys. And it says, Brooklyn prosecutors are asking to keep R. Kelly's sensitive information under wraps, including medical records, to expedite the case. And it says prosecutors didn't say what was found, but they did say it was financial and medical records. They have yet to turn over the evidence to the singer's lawyers. It says the reason for the prosecutor's request, so the process to examine the evidence can go quickly. And so that to me is just really interesting, and I'm not sure exactly what that means. Do they not want the defense to be able to look at the records that they've come up with, because there's information that could hurt their case and be beneficial to R. Kelly? And then I was wondering if this was connected to the information I provided in a previous video where his attorneys were trying to get this information from the prosecutors, and wanted to know how did they obtain his medical records. So is all of this intertwined and connected with each other? And then another story that came out was about a plea agreement. And so according to Steve Greenberg, they are not trying to enter into a plea deal or negotiating a plea deal with prosecutors. And I believe that this article was just like a bait article where, and I believe it was The Blast that put it out, and they're not really all that credible, but they did. Well, they didn't interview the lawyer, but they get their news stories from other news stories, and then they kind of like rehash the information. But basically, they interviewed a attorney, and so people are constantly talking about how the feds have a 90% success rate in prosecutions, and so people get caught up in that 90% number. But what they don't understand is that the federal government is notorious for piling on, like any way they can twist and turn a case to try and pile on charges, they will. And the reason they do that is not necessarily because they have the evidence to prove it, but they do that to intimidate the defendant and make them think, how we hear them say, oh, he's facing 595 years. And I told you guys before that that's adding all the highest level, the maximum amount of time that a person can get for a particular charge, and then they add all those together to come up with these crazy numbers and say, oh my God, this person's going to spend all this time in jail, when the truth is the majority of cases, when a person is found guilty, those charges run concurrent, meaning that you're serving all your sentences at the same time. So if one of your charges, the maximum is 20 years and you get 20 years, it doesn't matter if you were convicted of 10 different charges, the most time you're going to spend in prison is 20 years. Whereas if it's consecutive, then they add it together and then you run it sentence by sentence by sentence. And that only happens in like really notorious cases, like a serial murder would serve their term consecutively. Remember the doctor in the gymnast case where he received all these years in prison because there were like 200 and something victims. So his term is consecutively because they never want him to see the light of day. And so I don't see that happening in the R. Kelly case, but then we didn't see any of this happening. But basically, more than likely, if he is found guilty, it would be concurrent on the sentencing. And so the attorney in the article that I was reading, but he was basically saying that it would serve no purpose for R. Kelly to actually plea out to any of these charges because the feds are out to get him for whatever reason. And so, in most cases, the person will plea out to a lesser charge, and then the prosecution will drop all the other charges, and then you serve 5 years or whatever. But they say in R. Kelly's case, the feds are trying to prove a point, so they're not going to let him plea out to a lesser charge. They're going to want him to plea out to one of the charges that has the maximum sentence that he will spend. So if you're already going to spend 20 years in prison, what are you going to plea out for? It just doesn't make sense. And so the attorney was saying that he didn't see it benefiting R. Kelly to take a plea deal. And then we have Steve Greenberg saying that they're not trying to negotiate a plea deal with him. And then, just like with Bill Cosby, if you're contending that you are innocent, what is the point of pleading out? And so I think the reason that so many people, especially when it comes to drug dealers, the reason that they take the deal is because they know they're guilty, and then they're afraid of spending their life in prison, and so they don't go that route. And I believe that that was all the updates, or the things that really caught my attention that I wanted to include in the video. So let's go ahead and let me give you my thoughts on the whole interview with the twins. So you guys just heard what Angelo had to say about it, and I somewhat agree with his assessment on what he said about the twins, and that's why I decided to go ahead and do this part. So basically, you guys know that there's a 4-part docuseries coming out that's supposed to be giving, it's called The Aftermath, Surviving R. Kelly, The Aftermath, and it is supposed to give different point of views from people regarding the case. And then I guess the part they did say, so she said that there's 4 parts, but she gave us the topics for 3. And so she said one part is supposed to cover more victims that have come forward since the original show came out. And so I'm assuming that these more victims are like the Lanita Carter will probably be a part of it. Then whoever, the 2 women from Baltimore who claimed that they were victimized, maybe whoever the Minnesota person is, the Heather Williams. So once again, we're still dealing with the same group of people. And then she says that the other part is going to be about the case. And then there's going to be the part that they are doing, which is people who are close to R. Kelly. And so my point of view, and the point of view that other people have shared, is why would Lifetime put out this 4-part docuseries when it's so close to the trial coming out? So we know that the Illinois judge has already said that he wants his case to go to trial by April 2020. And then the New York case is saying that they want to go to trial even earlier than the Illinois case goes to trial. And basically they're just jockeying for position. It's not that any case is stronger than the other case. And so why would Surviving R. Kelly do this? Why would Lifetime do this when you're just further trying to taint the jury pool, trying to sway people's opinions? And so people were saying, why won't his attorneys fight to have the docuseries, or get the judge to put a gag order on the docuseries, because this is just too important for them to be out there putting these movies and documentaries out. And so I don't know if there's any legal justification for stopping Lifetime from doing this, but if there is, I definitely think that his legal team needs to start working on it soon. And then they claim that the reason that there is a segment of the docuseries that's dedicated to people that are close to R. Kelly, that are going to give his side of the story, is because R. Kelly's legal team had filed a lawsuit against Lifetime for the original docuseries, and I'm kind of having trouble believing that because, one, it would have been all over the news if they had filed a lawsuit against Lifetime. I don't think that the media would have strayed away from the fact that a lawsuit had been filed. I do believe that Lifetime would have went public about the lawsuit. But then they said something about the production company and the fact that they own MTV and they own Lifetime and they own all these shows. I don't think that production companies work that way. Well, first of all, we know that a lot of these stations, they own the Kardashian show, which is inaccurate information, because first of all, a lot of these networks are owned by Viacom. When production companies come in, they come in to produce shows. That's just like David E. Kelly, for example. He's a famous writer and producer, and so he has produced a lot of really popular shows that have come out, but he sells those shows to different networks for them to come on television. And so that would be the same thing with this production company. They come up with a show and then they sell their show ideas to different networks. They market them around to see who will pick them up. So that was a little bit of misleading information. And then at one point they say that they're not working with R. Kelly's attorneys. Then in other parts of the interview, they say that they are working with R. Kelly's attorneys. Then they say that Doug Anton and Steve Greenberg won't talk to them, but they talked to Nicole Becker. They say that they talked to the federal attorney. Then they say that, then they just keep going back and forth about whether or not they're working with the attorneys, if the attorneys know that they're doing this show. So that was kind of skeptical. And then overall, I just felt like a lot of the information that they were putting out in the interviews was stuff that, people are saying on YouTube channels, stuff that's being posted on social media. I don't know, it's just they don't seem to really have facts. It's like they're doing like a lot of people do, where they're just grabbing this information and then trying to make it sound like it's factual. And that's one of the reasons why when I'm doing my videos, I'm giving my opinion and my point of view, but then I'm also reading the actual articles where my point of view is coming from. And so it just gets really confusing, because then you have all this information out there that may or may not be factual. And so then they talked about how they, Lindsay talks about her testimony during the 2008 trial, and how, people are really coming for her. And so then she explains what she said at the 2008 hearing. But then if you go through the comments of that video, you'll see that there was somebody in that video, in the comments, who actually copied and pasted her actual testimony. So then when she came back to do the follow-up video, then she was kind of like holding her head down, like she was reading what her testimony was. And so basically she said all along that, she was subpoenaed to come in, that the day she was supposed to testify, they held her in a room and they made her watch the video for over an hour, and then they were kind of, I guess, like, manipulating her mind or something. And then when she went in to court, she was on the stand for an hour, and then they were asking her, was that Robert, was that the Rashana girl? And so, after having watched the video for an hour, she at that point believed that it was, and so she said that it was. And so I'm sitting there saying, like, I can watch something 100 times and still be looking at it, pointing out, and you guys know I do it in my videos, or especially when I'm recapping TV shows. I'm like, child, that don't even make no sense. Like, how they gonna say that? Or like, I really like that show, but child, that wouldn't happen in real life. And so she's blaming her testimony on being scared. She's blaming her testimony on, being young, being afraid, being manipulated. And I'm just thinking, if I'm watching a video, first of all, if you locked me in a room for an hour and said, watch this video, if I don't want to watch the video, I'm not watching the video, because I'm thinking I'm going to reach over there and press stop. I'm going to turn, if it's on a tablet, I'm going to turn the tablet down. If it's on a laptop, I'm going to close the laptop. I'm going to get up. I'm going to walk away from the video. Like, I'm not going to sit there for an hour watching this video, letting somebody mind fuck me into believing something that I don't believe to be true. And so then she goes on to say that she talked to R. Kelly afterwards. And so she tried to make it seem like she talked to him immediately after, but she doesn't give a time period. She doesn't give a date, a month, a year of when she actually talked to R. Kelly. But she said when she talked to him, of course, he was angry with her, and he was saying that, she could have refused to testify. And then she was saying, oh, well, I could have gone to jail. You might have gone to jail. They would have held you in contempt, but you wouldn't have went to jail forever. Okay, you might have been in jail for a few days, and then you come back and say, I'm still not going to testify. And then they see they can't break you. But, according to her, she wasn't going to jail for R. Kelly or anybody. And she needed R. Kelly to understand that, because she was white, okay, and she was privileged, she wasn't going to jail for him. And so they didn't talk for some time. Then they put out about, they stayed in touch with Drea, and she talked about how she was the one that got Drea on the Hollywood Exes show. And then after she got Drea on the show, I guess Drea stopped talking to her. And I was like, child. And then the other part that really stood out to me in the interview was she was saying that her and R. Kelly reconnected 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago, and that he wanted her to come back and work for him. And I'm thinking, is R. Kelly really that slow? There's somebody who done testified against you in the first trial that done said it was you and this minor in this video who could have possibly gotten you locked up from their testimony. You want them to come back to work for you? And 2 years ago was when this whole Surviving R. Kelly docuseries was the ball was rolling, getting into motion. That people were out there going and doing all the tour circuits, talking about this treatment that they experienced when they lived in that house in Atlanta. And so you were going to hire this woman back who had already betrayed you once. So I was like, okay, that's not making much sense. So then she says that since this whole filming of this series, this new docu-series, that she talked to R. Kelly over the 4th of July weekend, and she claims that they talked for 4 hours outside. She kept saying Junebug. So you remember I messed up and called the man Junebug, but they say the man's name is June. But she continued to call him Junebug throughout her interviews. And so anyway, she said it was R. Kelly, June or Junebug, and 2 other women who were not Azriel and Jocelyn, which I didn't understand what was the need to throw in that it was 2 women out there that weren't Azriel and Jocelyn. But anyway, she said that they stood out there for 4 hours talking. Then she goes on to talk about, how R. Kelly follows a routine. He has a very regimented routine. He goes out, sits by these planters and smoke his cigars. He goes out and walk the dog, which I can believe because that's how the feds picked him up. He was out walking the dog. So evidently they had been watching him and know his schedule and when he comes out. And so they know the schedule. And so were they invited to R. Kelly's house over the 4th of July weekend to have this conversation? Did they just roll up on R. Kelly because they knew he was going to be outside? And if that's the case, were there cameras rolling somewhere that he wasn't aware of? Were they mic'd up recording the conversation that they were having with R. Kelly? Like, is this going to be footage for the show to kind of prove that, oh yeah, she still knows R. Kelly or whatever? It was just too suspect for me. And so then she went on talking about, she met this guy contacted her, and this guy contacted her, and he wanted to do a street documentary about R. Kelly. And so she didn't trust the guy or whatever, so she had the guy come to where she lives just in case he tried something, because he was street, y'all. And her husband is a police officer. So if he tried anything, her husband was going to get him right. And so that was like one of the kind of racial overtones and comments that she made that, kind of didn't sit well with me. And so she kept saying that the guy's name was Shabazz. And so I did a little research. The person who I came up with, who I believe she's talking about, his name is Amir Abu Haq, Haqq. Shabazz. And so he was a producer on the movie Creed, the one that came out in 2015. He was the producer on a show called Rolling, and then there was another show, and I did get some images from his Instagram page that shows that he does work with Netflix, which is what she mentioned, and she says that he's shopping his docu-series with Netflix, and to show that he was in California around the time that I guess they were there doing the filming of the Aftermath docu-series. So I do believe that this is the guy that she's talking about. But getting to the whole racial overtone of what she was saying, she talked about, she definitely has, or both of them definitely have white privilege. Then she was comparing, she says that when they talk to people, the people want to know, well, why did R. Kelly trust them and why didn't they end up having sexual relationships with R. Kelly when all these black girls did. And so she kind of put it out there. It was because they were educated. Okay, she says that the majority of R. Kelly's staff has always been white people. He didn't have problems because he had all these white people on his staff. And so, they were more professional. And then she's kind of like doing this juxtaposition, saying that the girls that he was involved with, that he was messing with, they were poor, they came from horrible upbringing, they didn't know any better, they were looking for money, they were looking for the come up. And so we know that this happens a lot regardless of race. People are looking for the come up. Just look at Kim Kardashian and all the people she done screwed. All the famous people, like she ain't messing with no broke, okay, she only looking for rich people. So, white women do it, black women do it, but the way she presented the facts was that he preyed on these people because they were poor, they were uneducated, they were desperate for money, and then he gave jobs to the white people because they were smarter, they were more educated, they, were more professional.
One thing I do want to touch on is them twins. I don't know them. I don't know what era they was talking about and everything else, and it's fine. But what I do want to say is I didn't appreciate them calling young black women ignorant and lack of education. If she want to tell a story, you can't worry about lack of education when you're talking about kids. So they wouldn't have a degree like they have and all this that they was talking about they have. Like, that made no sense to me. Like, why would you be in here even talking about your degree and all this if you talking as a form of you being an adult and we talking about kids that's caught up in the situation. So, of course, they wouldn't have the college degrees. So, moving forward, I just don't appreciate any of us allowing anyone to sit in our face and just degrade us to the fullest. Like, degrade us to the smallest level. And then we always blame education, one parent. Man, we black, we strong.
So a person's education really doesn't play a big role into their decision-making ability when it comes to life skills, because we've all heard that saying that people are book smart and street dumb. Okay, so for them to throw their education up in people's faces, like, I don't know, I felt some kind of way about that. And, I have a college degree, but I don't think that my college degrees have anything to do with, if I'm out on these streets and somebody approaches me, what decision I'm going to make. And I think that your decision-making ability, especially in this, circumstance, has a lot to do with your parenting, and it has a lot to do with your upbringing. And then even as, we look at the Clarys and we look at the Savages, and so we look at the Savages and we know that there is abuse in the home, and that probably led to whatever's going on with Jocelyn and whatever she was seeking at that time. And then we look at the Clarys, and I mentioned before, how Angelo has that hustler mentality, and that can kind of mess up a child's, frame of mind and what they're looking for. And then we look at how, she was thrust into the limelight, whether she wanted to be an artist or she didn't want to be an artist, but her family was definitely pushing her in that direction. And so you have your Lisa Van Allens who say that they, were raised in the foster care system. And so we can understand that mentality of, never wanting to be at the mercy of somebody else, and trying to be connected with a superstar to make yourself feel important. And then we can look at an Azriel Clary and Jocelyn Savage, who were raised in two-parent homes and still were seeking something else. And I don't think either one has to do with education, because even with Azriel, with that video I showed, the video I talked about in my last video where she did that interview in 2013, she talks about being a student, being smart, and how when, the whole thing went down with R. Kelly, we see that she still continued her education and made sure that she got her high school diploma. So there really was no reason for them to be throwing in, the fact that they have college degrees, they have master's degrees. Hell, I have that, okay? So I didn't understand what that had to do with anything. And then looking at my own daughters, like who both have multiple college degrees, but they're two totally separate people who make two totally separate decisions in life. So I just felt some kind of way about her throwing in that whole education thing. And so I was just like, girl, are you serious right now? Then add the part about where she had the guy come to where she lived because her white husband is a police officer, and that this black street dude, and she kept calling him street, he brings it to the street. And so, my hood. So I had him come to my hood. And then she says that that R. Kelly liked women with big butts. And so when he did mess with the white woman, they had to have big butts, insinuating that black women have big butts. Okay. And so a white woman, had to been emulating a black woman, in order to get his attention. And she talks about the fact that Drea butt ain't real. She says that R. Kelly paid for Drea to get butt implants. So what do y'all think about that? So I don't know, just overall. And then I just found that when they were ending up their videos, that they were kind of like very condescending in their tone and in their speech. And, basically saying, at one point she says that, I think it was Jen, that said that it's un-American, which is like code words with Trump organization, that it is un-American not to believe in R. Kelly and not to take R. Kelly's side. And so it was sort of like, if you're not supporting R. Kelly and you're not seeing what's being done to him, then you're un-American for being that way. You're un-American for having your own thought process. You're un-American, for being able to look at the facts and come up with your own opinion. And I'm thinking people can look at information and come up with 1,000 different opinions on what's going on. It doesn't make them un-American. So, and then they were like, either you're with us or you're not with us, and we don't have time for it, and we're going to come, anybody come for us, we're going to come for them. And I'm just like, girl, if y'all will go somewhere and sit down. So overall, I had some more notes, but that was the main thing that I wanted to talk about, was just, I just found in these latest videos, now that they are, and then they talked about, they're trying to get a bigger platform. So if anybody, any publicists out there, they're looking for representation. And I'm thinking, okay, well, Daryl available, go call Daryl and ask Daryl if he'll be your publicist. And, they're trying to get more interviews. And then this was a very important thing that they talked about. They talked about the fact that, like I said, they keep going back and forth on whether or not they've talked to R. Kelly's lawyers or they haven't talked to R. Kelly's lawyers. But my opinion, and then it was interesting because Angelo shared the same opinion, which is kind of creepy. But I have said this all along, that nobody in their right mind is going to call on people who are getting on YouTube and being interviewed by YouTubers to be a witness for R. Kelly, because it would be too easy to impeach you. And, because I'm sure his defense team is watching these videos that are coming out, just like the prosecutors are watching the videos. So if they mess around and bring these girls onto the court, into the court hearing to testify on R. Kelly's behalf, the first thing the prosecution is going to do is they're going to go back and pull the testimony from the 2008 trial, and they're going to read that testimony, and then they're going to hammer her about her testimony, where she clearly says that it was R. Kelly and Rashana in the video. So why in God's creation would his defense attorneys want to call them to the stand to talk about anything with R. Kelly? And then you're sitting there already saying that the man is over sexualized and he's this and he's that. All of that is stuff that makes you the perfect witness for the prosecution, not the defense. So he's not going to call you. They're not going to call Demetrius. They're not going to call Kip. They're not going to call anybody that has been on social media doing all these videos, running support channels and all of this stuff. So my notion is that the people who aren't talking, who aren't coming out for R. Kelly, are people who are more credible witnesses, who may be talking to Greenberg, who may be being set up to become witnesses for R. Kelly, because there's no information out there to impeach their testimony. Like, girl, come on. And so I felt that a lot of what they were doing was really publicity. Like, they're using phases as publicity to drum up interest in this docu-series that's about to come up, and the fact that they don't realize that they're being manipulated in that way is another reason that I have cause of concern about them and whether or not they're really benefiting R. Kelly by doing this. And then they called Dana J a conspiracy theorist. They said that Dana J reached out to Lifetime, but Lifetime didn't want to work with him, because they say he's a conspiracy theorist. So kind of like throwing Dana J under the bus. And so I don't know, they talk about all the people they've talked to, the Wayne guy, the Julius Darrington guy, who's the A&R guy. They talked about R. Kelly's music, is safe with his sound engineer, and that this guy, or his recording engineer, who's been with him for 20-something years, and that Julius reached out to the guy about releasing the music, but the guy said no, he couldn't do it, that he needed to get in touch with R. Kelly first to see if R. Kelly was okay with the music being released, and just child. And then they talked about Sony, and then this goes back to, I think that they're just scouring social media like everybody else, getting information, because I've actually mentioned like in 3 other videos about the fact that when R. Kelly's contract ended with Sony, he still had 2 remaining albums on his contract, but according to Lindsay, his contract was over, and that R. Kelly went in and told and ended the relationship with Sony. In my opinion, the contract wasn't over because he still had 2 albums that would do, but Sony wasn't promoting him. They hadn't promoted him since they took over his account when the merger with Jive took place. Jive and Zumba took place, and so I don't know. And you can go back and watch my video about the whole masters and copyrights and all that stuff, because I basically spelled out what I think happened when R. Kelly went in and talked with Sony, and that they did make a negotiation, and that until we see the contract that they negotiated, we don't know what R. Kelly received, what Sony is willing to do for R. Kelly, what their relationship still is without seeing that contract. And so I'm going to end this here, because I could go on and on and on about that interview. But pretty much, what did you think about the comments that they made during those interviews? Did you feel the racial overtones? Do you trust the twins? Do you think that them doing this docuseries is a good idea, or do you think it's going to come back and bite them in the behind? And whether or not they are sincere in their efforts, because they're saying that the reason they decided to do the project was because nobody else was coming to them. Nobody else was asking for their opinion. And so since these were the only people, providing a platform for R. Kelly, that was why they jumped on the project. It doesn't seem like they received any professional counseling from an attorney, from like a PR person, from an entertainment contract standpoint. It doesn't seem like they got any professional guidance before they jumped into this. And so what do you guys think? Leave your comments below, rate the video, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. And until the next time, I shall talk to you guys later. Bye bye.